and Wander presents... Oh, how stylish. Guess what? It's me, it's Heather. And welcome to A Case of Distrust. We're in the seas, remember? So it's sea time. That sounds... We're not going in the ocean or anything. Like sea, like the letter C. You know what I mean. This is a case of... I have no idea what this game is about. But we're gonna play it. It's been in my Steam library, and we're gonna play it. I'm excited. Ooh. I awoke in my desk chair. Across from me were his piercing amber eyes. They surprised me at first, but I should have known he'd be there. I stretched and said mid-yawn, not very nice to sneak into a sleeping woman's apartment, but his stare just continued. I cursed the open window. Of course, that's how he'd entered. I'd hoped to finally rest my eyes a while, but fate often disagrees with me. I knew I didn't have what he wanted. Reaching into my coat, I took out my knife and flicked it open. Well, I'm not giving him the knife. I held the knife steady, while staring back at him. Look, I said, nodding towards the desk. That's all there is. Take it or leave it. But a detective knows when she's beat, and I knew then. He wanted to search the place, and that's what he would do. I sighed, knowing my weakness for his type. All right, I said, let's look. He let out a gleeful meow in victory. I cut a piece of my apple that the cat had rejected. Always the sore winner, I jabbed. But I was smiling too, because I was telling the truth. There was absolutely no other food in my apartment. I loved this. The cat often dropped by to scavenge. He made a lot of noise when he thought I was holding out on him, but right now the place was clean empty, no food anywhere. I had to prove it to him. Okay. Can I look at stuff? That lamp had belonged to my Uncle Louis. He'd been an SFPD officer, one who argued policewomen could be good detectives, even while the others jeered at me. I knew he'd been right, but my current workload didn't help that claim. I thought about Louis more often than I wanted. I was lousy at handling the emotions behind those thoughts. I'd taken copies of old murder cases from the SFPD records when I'd left. I'd loved reading through them, even though my own contributions were minimal. At that time, I longed for those types of jobs. The truth was, any work was hard to find for a female detective. Packaged cigarettes were the latest trend, but I still preferred to roll my own. The ashtray was evidence that it was a practiced skill. I suppose I had a lot of free time back then. I kept a small statue underneath the side table. It had been police evidence in a crime, and its owner hadn't wanted it back. I took a shine to it, so I snagged it for myself on the way out of the department. A newspaper was flopped on the floor, its headline about the death of Lenin, leader of the Red Menace sweeping Russia. It seemed the Bolsheviks had lost their heads. My old notebook now filled to the brim. I wrote everything down, even the minor details. Never know, it can be useful. The second half had my current bunk, adultery cases, the only things I'd get hired to do. Whatever my findings, my employers often refused to believe me. It was thankless work, but even that was hard to come by. I want to look at the what is this? That's a safe. I guess I should look at all this stuff first. The regular white icebox. Oh wait, it looked like a big safe. The regular white icebox, tinged yellow with age, half blocked the kitchen door, and my income rarely kept much stock in it, and right now it was empty. See? There's nothing there. I don't want to leave. The cat had waltzed into my apartment a few years earlier. He kept coming back, though there was rarely a morsel to eat. He continued his loud meowing until I proved to him the place was empty of food. This is so cute. It doesn't matter how doe-eyed you are, cutie pie. We've got no food around, I told him. He licked his chops and looked at me. Apparently, he still didn't believe me. I needed to contradict him somehow, to show him something in the apartment that would prove it was empty of food. The icebox is already empty of food. Wait, there were no cases just then, but the cat was mewing and needed attention. I had to contradict the cat by first talking to him, then pointing to a piece of evidence in my notebook that proved the apartment was empty of food. Icebox? I opened the icebox so the cat could see inside. Empty, I told him. Oh, prove there's nothing to eat in the apartment. The cat looked quizzically at the open door in the back of me. Sorry, fella, there's no grub in there for me either. He stared at me with those eyes as disappointed as I felt. Those big yellows always got to my soul. Thoughts of my family filled my head. My sister Muriel had sent a letter with an update of her life in Chicago. She and her husband had just purchased a new home outside the bluster of the city. Their 3 young children were looking forward to the move. I never told Muriel, but those letters... kept me going. Hearing about my family, however remote, helped me cope with the isolation I was feeling. I'd refused to accept it myself back then, but perhaps Muriel had known anyway. My sister had the ordinary lifestyle that I'd rejected. I'd wanted to... change the world. I'd wanted to change the world, to bring justice for victims, especially the ones who no longer had a voice. Not that I was helping advance that cause with the types of cases coming my way. My mind spiraled into the usual series of questions. Had I even impacted the women's movement? Had I made any change on society at all? Was my plodding career worth losing traditional happiness? What was the point in the life I had chosen? A loud meow from the cat snapped my thoughts back into the moment. I took a deep breath and grinned back at him. Guess you can scram now, I said. Nobody's gonna come knocking with food for you, fella. Oh, I love you. Someone else is gonna come knocking, though. There immediately came a banging on the front door. Beyond a nuisance, this cat was psychic, too. You order out? I asked him. Did I look at everything? I love this. In the doorway was the regrettably familiar face of Connor Green. I looked past him, peering left and right into the hallway. I heard a woman's heels marching down the carpeted stairs, but otherwise the building was silent and empty. Evidently, Green had come alone. I love the animation, too. This is really cool. He stared at me through the door with a coy smile. Well, ain't you gonna invite me inside? I let him through the door before closing it. Hey now, he said, looking at my apartment. You know this clutter might turn off some customers. Maybe not me, though. So that was his angle, hiring me as a detective. I wondered what a bootlegger would need with a private eye, but he answered without my prompt. I'll make this quick. I can't take this to the hog house or the pigs would laugh me out. And other dicks just aren't as tempting, his grin widened. Thought this was going to be quick, I said, and started rolling a cigarette. It wasn't quick, and I'd already rolled and lighted a second smoke when Green finally finished his story. I noted the important bits in my book. It had started with a letter slipped under his door in a white envelope. The envelope contained a single typewritten leaf, which he handed to me. It read, "End your game or we'll end you." It had no signature, instead ending with only a small scribble in the bottom right corner that resembled a black hand. Green had a lead on a new rum-running scheme, a connection from Vancouver. He'd given a sample to Tiny Paul, the gangster who ran the Tin Spoon Speakeasy for mob boss Jerry Ferry. They'd agreed to buy in for more. Green surmised the letter was about his rum-running. He suspected Redstone Stable, another bootlegger, of sending the letter. He told me that Stable ran a barbershop during the day and gave me the address. Green needed to know who the threat was from. He'd get Paul's gang to deal with them and continue his scheme to get rich. If I go snooping myself, he concluded, folks see I'm not trusting people. No trust leads to no customers. I need to play it low key, which is where you come in. I raised an eyebrow and stared at him through the cigarette smoke. Something in his yarn was still twisted. He must have noticed my reticence, because he said, you know, I work closely with Lewis. I'm sure he'd want to protect me as much as any other victim. My uncle. Lewis had put me on the force. I finally accepted Lewis's death, or I was still searching for answers. I was still searching for answers after his death. He'd been a man obsessed with helping victims and bringing justice to those beyond salvation. With that ethos, I never understood how he could have taken his own life. Those thoughts haunted me. I quit the SFPD and started my own practice, taking his philosophy. Was Green worth my time? Green had tipped off my uncle in a few cases. I wondered if that was enough to warrant my protection. Before I could think past my headache, he threw a bill in my lap. Keep the C-note as a retainer, and don't worry about getting in touch. I'll find you later for a chat. He walked out the front door, and I let him go. If he was willing to give me $100 with no commitment, I wouldn't stop him. I turned back to the apartment, still confused about the whole story. My headache wasn't helping either. Whenever I lacked clarity, a trip to Southern Coffee was usually the cure. I guess we're going then. I'd mounted a gold plate on the outside that read PC Malone, Private Investigator. There was only one place I needed to go to clear my head. Southern Coffee was a basement dive. It wasn't modern, hip, or ever busy, and it was my favorite place to down some paint, especially in the company of the best bartender in the city. I gave my address and slouched in the back seat of the taxi cab. I thought a good way to pass the journey might be to chat with the driver. Talk. We talked about the weather and not much else. Sometimes taxicab drivers made poor conversation partners. Southern Coffee was an automat diner. Ethel Burgess, the lone waitress, was friendly to help with any inquiry. Of course, if you winked at her right, she'd show you the way to the downstairs toilet where Frankie played bathroom attendant. Southern Coffee had the distinct feeling of home. The familiar smell of mold in that old basement was enough to put a grin on my face. Frankie had a bond with that old shaker at the end of the bar. I was surprised he hadn't named it. He could sling a mean drink, though he'd only use a good liquor if he liked you. Frankie liked me. The bar stools were crooked and worn. My usual one was in the center of the room. I could sit on it for hours if Frankie had a yarn to spin. Of course, the sauce helped keep me in place, too. Don't talk to me yet. Hold on. Frankie kept a collection of pre-prohibition bottles on a shelf behind the counter. Their shapes and colors were far more alluring than the opaque jugs of modern swill. This label showed a rearing horse in front of a forest. I had no idea how the horse related to California's most genuine bourbon whiskey, though I suppose I did stare at the picture long enough to whet my appetite for the bottle's contents. This label had a poem on it. Fill full your cups, feel no distress. At all our great thoughts shrinking less, we do a good deed nevertheless. Once I'd asked Frankie to lend me some cash from that register. He growled so fierce that I decided not to ask again. I didn't think his employers would notice before I got it back, but maybe he just wanted to save me from myself. This bottle showed a California bear with the words Bohemian type in block letters underneath. I doubted that bear ever heard of Bohemia, but he did look carefree. Frankie tended bar at Southern Coffee. Though it wasn't his place, I never caught a whiff of the real owners. They trusted Frankie to do what he did best. I said, "Hello, Frankie," and was met with a smile and a grunt from Franklin Ernest Conway. He'd been a decent pitcher. He was a fantastic orator. He was a big fella. He was a fantastic orator. He was a fantastic orator, but knew when to be a good ear, too. For my money, there hasn't ever been, nor will there ever be, a more loyal barman. I sat at the bar. "You got the Smooks PC?" he asked. "You're worn as a catcher's mitt. I suppose my exhaustion showed. I won $100 for nothing, and I can't let it go." I told Frankie about the case, the threatening letter sent to Connor Green. Now he assumed it was related to his bootlegging and his suspicion of Redstone Stable. The story took longer than I wanted. Frankie showed genuine interest by asking many questions. When I finished, he threw me the whiskey sour he'd been stirring. I took a large gulp and gave a sigh as thanks. "Well, Green's case is better than most of what you're given," he said with some enthusiasm. "At least it's not more of that adultery bunk." "Sure," I replied. "But I started with a goal in mind. What's the point in helping a man like Green?" Frankie clicked his tongue on his teeth. "Lawyer or priest, why does it matter? Let me ask you, are the clients you have now the types you want to help?" I admitted they weren't. I told him that I'd wanted more for my detecting life. "It could be the Green's case shoots your career forward, Malone." I sighed and stared down at my drink. But my daze was interrupted by the basement door opening then slightly shut. A small blustering woman began marching toward me. She looked younger than... She looked younger than 25 and was a few inches shorter than my 5'6". I thought her gray trench coat was too large for that small frame, which was when I realized it was exactly like the one that had belonged to Lewis. She hurled insults at me a while. All I could do was sit and take it until she ran out of gas and started breathing heavily. I set my drink on the bar and looked her in the eyes. I inserted a "Hello, I'm Phyllis Malone. How can I help you?" accompanied by a smile as genuine as I could muster. That knocked her off balance. She stumbled over her next few words, and I added, "And you are?" The flame returned to her eyes. Between clenched teeth, she hissed, "I'm the wife of that bum who sneaks into your bed." The cat? But humor wasn't her angle, and she launched into another poetic stanza. "And he just left your sty this morning," she finally ended. And that was when I gathered she was Connor Green's wife. "Mrs. Green, I'm a PI, not a homewrecker, and I don't think your husband, in his line of business, would want to bet a dick anyhow." Her look was pure incredulity. "A woman in that line of work?" she questioned. "I don't believe it." "Prove it." "What? I mean... Green's letter?" I told her about why Connor had come to me, the bootlegging and the threats. "You see, Mrs. Green, this is what I can do. There's not much more I can show you to prove it." It still took more coaxing for her to believe me, but eventually she came around. She seemed grateful I'd explained to her. Apparently, she'd seen her husband leave my apartment, and distraught, she'd followed me all the way to Frankie's basement and decided to confront me. "Okay, but what about the coat?" "I suppose I lost my head after what I thought I'd seen," she said, and she began to cry. Frankie, ever chivalrous to a dimpled girl, came around the bar and held her up. "Now that's all right, Mrs. Green. Why don't I hail you a cab and send you back home?" She agreed, and they walked together up the stairs. When Frankie returned, I said to him, "You turned night real quick." He snorted a laugh. "Oh, hell, we can't have that siren in here. With a torture yelling like that, every street bugger would have come to her rescue." "What about the coat? I should have asked about the coat." "Mrs. Green is a torch singer?" "Well, I learned she was Mrs. Connor Green just now when she came in here. I'd only seen her as Lil Fanny singing lead for the jazz band at the Tin Spoon." "The Tin Spoon," I said. "Tiny Paul's joint? That's where Green is selling his liquor." "Say, you think that's where she met her husband?" I laughed. "You're a real sleuth, Frankie." He made a sarcastic bow. I shook my head. "You're telling me you escorted our little torturer out to avoid a bit of hot water?" Frankie flushed and said, "What are you talking about, Malone?" I was never good with emotions, but it was plain that Frankie had instantly fallen for the girl. "So what if I had more to squeeze out of her?" I asked. "What more could you possibly want from Lil Fanny? She can't have anything to do with Green's mess." "What about her coat?" "Did you notice her clothes? That gray trench, maybe?" I posed to him. "It looked a bit large on her, don't you think?" "I thought she looked lovely," he said. "That trench," I continued, "belonged to Lewis." Frankie's eyes widened. "So that scumbag Green might actually have been close to your uncle," he exclaimed. "Or she might have. Either way, it's not total bunk." I stood up from the bar stool. What had just happened was quite the ruckus. It seemed like my cue to move along. "Where are we going next? Are we going to go to the Tin Spoon?" I was heading up the stairs when Frankie called after me. "So what are you going to do?" I'd been thinking... technically, okay. I want to know more about everything. I'd been thinking about Lil Fanny. I suppose even mobsters had people who cared about them, and she'd been wearing Lewis's old jacket, so perhaps Green and Lewis had been closer than I'd realized. "I guess I'll take Connor Green's bait," I replied. "I've got nothing better on the stove, and he might need the help. Something still stinks, though." "What's your plan?" Frankie asked. "The way I see it, I have 3 goals right now. Green hired me for a job. Find the guy who wrote the letter. That's the basic part." "But you want more?" asked Frankie. I nodded. "Green's a shady character. I have to learn about him. Who's this guy? Dig in his past. I can't go back to him blind. And then there's something about his bootlegging. How'd Green get a connection like that? What's his source exactly? Squeezing that lemon might give me more juice." "That sounds all right," he replied. "So where is it you're off to?" "I've got 3 leads. That bootlegger stable, who Green claims sent him the letter, the Tin Spoon Lounge, where I might learn more about Green's rum-running schemes, and Mrs. Green, who could give me more dirt on her husband." Frankie nodded his approval. "Well, if you're ever stuck, come back and see me. You can never solve anything without talking it over." I smiled and went up the stairs. Started the case. Oh. Should we just go in order? Wait, Stable's the guy that possibly sent him the note, right? Green had suspected Redstone Stable of sending him that letter. Apparently, Stable owned a barbershop in the financial district. I figured there'd be no harm in asking Stable about it directly. I'm gonna talk to everyone. As I glanced toward the driver, I spotted a strange device attached to his windshield. A rectangular mirror, about 3 inches tall and 7 inches wide, was held by a metal bracket. I asked about the mirror. He looked at me through it without needing to turn around. "See how I can see you?" he asked. "I can also see that bull behind us." I turned in my seat and saw a police wagon a block behind us. "It's called a cop spotter," he continued as I turned back to the mirror. "Sold by this fellow Burger? Works pretty well for knowing when to bend the law." "Might be a good tool for bootleggers," I offered as we arrived at my destination. He turned around for the first time with a wide grin. "Yes, it might be." I smiled back and left the taxicab. The barbershop was down an alley in the financial district, opposite the red brick National Bank. The small bell above the door twinkled as I walked in. 2 sides of the mirror's frame were cylindrical, painted blue, red, and white to look like barber's poles. Modern hydraulic barber chair had always seemed ostentatious to me, but this one with its soft brown cushions and gold embroidery was the most ornate one I'd ever seen. The frame on the back wall contained a yellow photograph of an old man. He had an authentic smile and held scissors in his left hand. Stable's cabinet was similar to my own, but where mine was a dull gray metal, his was a deep red wood that looked heavy. Fancy. The hat rack was a deep mahogany engraved with gold lettering that read Fraser & Co. Furnishings. The maroon leather chair looked comfortable. It seemed elaborate for a barbershop waiting chair. There was a tall man in the center of the room. He was wearing a flamboyant pink suit, tailored to accentuate his stature, with a maroon bow tie and pocket square. I gathered that this was Redstone Stable. The man turned to face me. He grinned, and his squinting blue eyes made the smile feel genuine. "I must apologize," he said. "We do not take walk-ins." I studied his face. The wrinkles around his eyes indicated he was at least 40, but the rest of his skin was clean and smooth. He wore no hat and shaved his head completely bald. When combined with his smooth skin, it hinted at the look of a small turtle. His pink suit and maroon accessories only added to his eccentricity. He smiled and said, "How foolish of me. Of course. You're here for information, Miss Malone? How'd you know my name?" I asked how he knew my name. He tisked a few times and said, "That is a dull retort. You know you're not a standard detective. Please do not act as mundane as all other sleuths." Okay. He sighed, but put a smile back onto his face. "Yet perhaps you're here on a matter of interest. What is it you want?" Green's letter? I pulled Green's note from my pocket and showed it to him, but didn't let him hold it. "Green tells me this letter's from you," I told him. "He doesn't like the threats." Stable lowered his head to study the note, then chuckled. His knowing grin returned to his face. "But this is a black hand letter," he said, flourishing a hand towards the paper. "Have you ever seen a black hand letter, Miss Malone?" "I have now." I confessed I hadn't. "Exactly," he said. "You should ring your friend Shipman at the station and ask what it means." Sam Shipman had been one of my uncle's regular partners in the vice rackets. I wondered what Shipman could have to do with Green's case. Stable seemed to think that he had a lot to do with it. I pocketed the letter and continued with my questions, but I made a note to stop by police headquarters and see Shipman. "Well, Miss Malone," he smiled, "will there be anything else?" I mean, I don't think so, right? Should I say that Connor thought it was him? "Green claims you bootleg," I stated bluntly. His grin didn't waver in his response. "Would you hang me on Connor Green's claims? I may partake in some gambling, and I may have a talent for it, but it is nothing illegal, I assure you." "And you know nothing about Green's own bootlegging?" I asked. Stable shook his head. I doubted he would ever answer a question straight. "Nothing now," I said, and turned back to the barber shop. So we need to go... Okay. So now I can go to the police station. Tin Spoon Lounge was a speakeasy in North Beach run by Tiny Paul, the gangster that Green had put in with. I'd never been there. The mob keeps a tight lip on their own houses, but I figured it would be a good place to chase Green's bootlegging store. Okay. Sure, let's try that one. I opened the cab door in front of a North Beach warehouse with a wooden sign. The sign's text was too worn for me to decipher any of its English, but a small gray spoon was still visible below the letters. I rapped my knuckles twice over the large metal door. A panel just above my head slid sideways to reveal a pair of eyes. "Hi." The eyes looked me up and down, then just stared ahead. They were black and held no emotion. The room beyond was dimly lit, so I couldn't see much of their surrounding face. I cleared my throat, then a rumbling voice emerged from behind the door. "Fill full your cups, feel no distress at all. Our great thoughts shrinking less." I looked at the eyes still unmoving. I understood. The doorman wanted a password. I thought I might have something in my notes that could help. What was the bottle with the poem, right? Yeah, it was Bear Horse poem. Use the password. "We do a good deed nevertheless. We'll do a good deed nevertheless." I recited from what I'd remembered from one of Frankie's bottles. The eyes squinted. "Wait here," came a gruff response. The panel slid shut and I heard footsteps walking away. I rolled a cigarette and waited. After a quarter of an hour, okay. The panel opened again. "Bar's closed, but you can shoot pool in the upstairs room," said the eyes. He pulled the door ajar so I could see a set of metal stairs. Why'd it take that long? I walked up the stairs and opened the thin wooden door to the billiards room. It was much smaller than I had expected for a gangster's paradise. The only light came from the hanging lamps above the billiards table. The haze of cigarette smoke darkened the room's corners. Tall chairs. The room was lit only by the thingies. A bottle of unlabeled wine sat on the table. Strong spice. Rock on the wall held 5 cues. The pool table was the focus of space. A light reflecting who's this person? I saw a tall, broad-shouldered man playing the table by himself. Based on Frankie's description, I gathered this was Tiny Paul. I cleared my throat to get him to look at me, then followed with a casual, "Are you ever going to take a shot?" He stood up straight, rested his cue on the table, and looked at me sideways. It was the petulant look of a boy forced to play with his younger sibling. "Hello," he sighed. I asked him more about billiards. "Thing is," he said in his baritone, "once you clear more balls than the other guy, you got more crap in your way. Billiards is all about navigating through the crap. I never shot much pool, but I thought he might like me more if I feigned interest. I considered lying to him, telling that I played a lot. No better sport, I lied. He didn't seem to like my answer. Sometimes you broads will say anything to get what you want." Still eyeing the billiards table, he asked, "And what is it you want?" "How's the gamble on that wine?" He grunted. "Green's setting it up. We're the muscle. What more is there?" "You like Green?" I asked. The wrinkles on his brow deepened. Like or dislike, it don't matter. Sometimes I work with what I'm given, and he's giving us a good lead. I suppose that's why you're here, Malone? So he'd known me too. The doorman must have looked me up. The Bay talks fast. Anyhow, he said, eyeing the billiards table, you need anything else from me? If you want something, better be specific. Mobsters never failed to grate my nerves. He wouldn't tell me anything unless I pushed him with what I already knew. Ask about notes. That bottle on the table, I asked. He said, that's the stuff, a sample from Green Source. Anything else? Okay, so the bottle was his. I mean, does he know anything about this? Know anything about this note? I asked and pulled out the letter with a black hand on it. Tiny Paw looked at the page and laughed with his whole body. So there is a letter. Green's shaking over that. I'm not losing sleep, though. Look, Green and I are best pals, but nobody will touch him with our protection, and none of us sent it to him, or else I would know about it. Anything else? Does he think? Didn't send the letter. Thinks the wine is legitimate. Know anything about Redstone Stable? I asked. Heard the name, he replied. But why all the gossip? He could tell you more about himself. You won't give me anything on that? Now, why would I do that? He shook his head and asked anything else. I just wanted to see if you thought he might have written the letter, even though he says he didn't. Claims he doesn't bootleg. I tried to work something about Stable from Tiny Paw, but he withstood my browbeating without letting anything slip. Alright, fine. I didn't have anything else to say to him, so he cracked his knuckles, arched over the table, and resumed lining up shots. Fine, I'll leave. Let's go see Mrs. Green. Green's house might contain more clues about his past, or some reason a threatening letter would come his way. And if I got lucky, Mrs. Green would be there to pump with more questions. The Greens' apartment was a section of an old Western Addition mansion. The owners had divided it for struggling families to rent after the 1906 fire. Once downtown had been rebuilt, people of means moved out of the area. Recent immigrants, mainly from Japan, rented most of the apartments in this part of town. Hello? I knocked on the front door but didn't get a response. The latch was undone, so I pushed it open and stepped into the room. Oh. The room reeked of laudanum. Based on the smell, I imagined she'd had enough opium to knock out a horse. Okay. The gray trench coat was hanging in the doorway. It certainly looked identical to Lewis's. I searched the pockets and found no identifying marks. It might have been a different jacket, but its recent appearance was off-putting. The bottles on top of the round table were mostly empty. I opened the drawer of the backmost table. In it were 2 train tickets. I mumbled St. Louis to myself, but then came the cackling voice of Mrs. Green. Ha! Forget about moving, Connor. I won't budge. Her head was raised, but her eyelids still remained closed. Ask her. I asked her further questions, but her head just lolled back to where it had been. There was nothing else she'd say. Okay. The ashtray on top of the smallest table was overflowing with spent cigarettes. A wilting plant was on the furthest table from the door. I could never keep plants alive either. Even as the petals fell, they were still a vibrant yellow. Empty bottles were strewn about the apartment. I brought one to my nose and smelled the distinct aroma of laudanum, opium mixed with booze, a harsh tonic. Did I get everything? I found Mrs. Green slumped in her chair, eyes closed. Hello, Mrs. Green, I said loudly. She let out a long moan from the chair, then lifted her head, but failed to raise her eyelids. She tilted her head to the side, giggled, then let it loll back into place. I shook her lightly and she moaned again, but said nothing more. I guess we're going to the police station then. All right. The frame was just warped enough to prevent the front door from closing. Police station. I always dreaded visiting the PD after I'd flown the coop, and I was in no mood right now, but if Shipman did know something about Green's note, I had to chase it up. The North Beach Station was SFPD headquarters, also poetically baptized the Hall of Justice. The building dominated the corner of Kearny and Washington in Chinatown. Rebuilt after the 1906 earthquake, I thought it looked even more sour than it had before. I strode to the young Bob girl behind the large oak desk. She must have been new because we shared no recognition of one another. I asked for Shipman, and she motioned me to a chair as she pressed a pearl button. I sat down, and she disappeared through a frosted door. I rolled another cigarette to pass the time. Between puffs, I thought about my history of the department. I imagined the station captain would have been furious had he known I was there. I did, after all, break a tumbler with the help of another officer's temple. That had been my last day on the force. It wasn't long before Shipman walked out of the frosted door. Samuel Shipman smiled when he saw me. He was tall and tanned, or he'd always been helpful. He'd always been helpful to me in my days on the force. Working closely with Lewis, he'd acquired the habit of bouncing theories my way. He'd judge officers purely on results, and because of that, he was one of my few fans. We exchanged brief pleasantries before he said, "Wouldn't come here for glad handing." He had a habit of removing the subject from his sentences. "What needs doing?" I explained my case to him. He scoffed when I mentioned Connor Green. "Working for that pinhead? Got a good mind to just run him up a flagpole. I just need to know about this letter." I handed him the note Green had given me and explained its context. After looking it over, Shipman tried to stifle a laugh. "Complete bunk," he said. "See the symbol in the corner? Mark of the Black Hand Gang. Except Black Hand letters are always ransom letters, not threats. No foothold on this coast anyhow. Never been one in California." "So the letter's a fake?" Shipman nodded. "Someone trying to imitate the Black Hand." I grunted a sigh and noted what he said. "Don't know if Green is getting one over you," he said, "or if someone else is pulling Green's leg, but having more dirt on the man couldn't hurt, especially if he's your client." I agreed. "I've been trying to dig through his past. You got any bunk on him?" Shipman shook his head. "No, from Oakland is all I know, but I can do some more digging." I thanked him for that. Under a pile of ice, though. Might take me a while. Why don't I telephone when I find something? I had no office where I could receive messages, but I dreaded returning to the station. Just told him to call Southern Coffee. "Just leave anything with Frankie Conway," I instructed. He said that was all right. We traded goodbyes, and I went back to the station's entrance. Now I knew the letter was fake, and Shipman was looking into Green's past for me. I just needed to chase up the bootlegging lead. I stepped into the street and thought about it. I guess let's go back to Shipman said he'd call Southern Coffee if he found any dirt on Green. I could go see if I had any messages. Of course, if I was stuck on the case. Okay, yeah, let's go there. I don't think he's called with any messages, but how's it going, Frankie? Frankie was still behind the bar. I wondered if Shipman had left any messages for me. Of course, if I was stuck on a case, a long drink with him might be helpful. Who's dinging at me? I don't know. "What's eating you, kid?" Ask about Shipman's messages? I looked at Frankie. I sat on my regular stool and rapped my knuckles on the bar. "Any messages, Frankie?" I asked him. "And what do you mean by that?" "Well, I told Sam Shipman, an old contact on the force, to leave any dirt with you if he found it." Frankie laughed. "So now I'm your bartender and your secretary. Say, if I become your housemaid, will you at least pay me? So I'm guessing you haven't heard anything." I said, "Nothing yet, Miss Chief." Frankie chuckled. "Shipman's supposed to call you about Green? What have you got so far?" "No real breaks to speak of," I said. "Well, all right, I'll let you know if Shipman gives me a call." I thanked him. "What else you got?" "Okay. I don't know what to do while I'm waiting for a call." A bit spicy, ain't it? Only this type of Napa wine is made from that Zinfandel grape. It has a unique aroma. I've been trying to learn more about wine. Does this have to do with the other wine bottle? Hang on, grabbing his hand. "Where'd you say this grape was from?" "It's from here, Napa." "Yes, it's the only place grapes grow nowadays." "And not Canada?" "What are you swinging at, Malone?" Tiny Paul had a bottle of wine that tastes the exact same. That identical spice. He said it was from Green's bootlegging source from Vancouver. "Malone, I'm telling you," he said, "no wine anywhere else in the world has that spice. It ain't from Vancouver and Green ain't getting it cheap." I nodded. "Well, you just confirmed my hunch. Green's got no source. He must be swindling Tiny Paul and the entire ferry gang, and I bet he'll run away with the money." Just then the phone rang. Okay, I've been running around. It was the wine bottle right there. Frankie picked up with a hello, right, then handed me the receiver saying Shipman. "PC," he said, his excited voice crackling the speaker. "Find anything on Green?" I asked. "Nothing," he said. I was puzzled. "Then why'd you call?" "That's the idea. First got pinched for a brawl in the ferry building. That was in November 1920. Before that, no Connor Green anywhere around the bay. Strange," he continued. "Has trouble staying out of a mess. Mixed up in something nearly every week. So only appearing a few years ago? That Oakland backstory, Swiss cheese." "What are you thinking? Green's got a different past?" I asked. "Uh-huh," he said. "Guess that he just got here in 1920 and never been straight about where he's from." "Wait," I said, "if Connor Green was a criminal in another town, easily some cop would recognize the name and send him back home. SOPD isn't that thick." "Right," Shipman agreed. "If it's the same name, could be his real identity disappeared in another town." I thought aloud. "So he might have changed lives. Is there any way to confirm that? If Green fled, the local bulls would keep looking for him, but not if they thought he died. Give these cases sometimes where mobsters fake a death to escape a burr. Use a mangled stiff to do it. Someone unrecognizable. That way they get out of town without a chase." "Got any mobster deaths in 1920? I asked. "A ton. Too many to look through, but narrow the search for me. A town he might be from. I could check a specific city's archive. Anything in your notes that tells us where he's from?" And it's that's the only place with like a thing, right? And when she said, I ain't moving, I found some tickets to St. Louis and Green's apartment. I told him the missus was ruffled when I picked them up. I stayed on the telephone while Shipman used another line to call his contact at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. I was nursing a glass of gin when he got back to me. Lucky break, PC. Seems there's one that fits the bill. He read aloud an article from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch dated October 8th, 1920. Gun battle at June's Diner, gangster dead. Suspected bandit clubhouse scene of another shooting. A heated argument turned deadly Thursday as multiple shots rang inside June's Diner on 14th Street. Suspected hideout of Egan's Rats. A man was found dead at the scene, unidentified due to shotgun wounds to his face. Police suspect he's mobster Bragg the Jester, who'd hired a private eye to investigate threats on his life. Last month, Chief of Police Brannon said investigating gangster on gangster deaths was a waste of time, and the discovery of the threats leads many to believe the police won't look further into the case. Hold on, I said. This Bragg character had hired a private detective? Seems police are quick to forget a case, if they got a reason to think it's just gangster violence. This lines up with Green, I said. Gets better. Bragg's first name? Connor. I cursed loudly through the telephone. I continued with my theory, and your story says this Bragg was deeply indebted, so maybe Green's just waiting in San Francisco until he's got enough dough to skip town and go home? He have some bootlegging business? Shipman asked. Why would he leave that behind? No, I shook my head. His wine is complete bunk. It's local stuff, not any Canadian route he might be claiming. I didn't know why he'd pull a fast one until now. Returning Bragg to St. Louis could be huge. Swing by the station, we'll iron it all out. I agreed and slammed the receiver on its pegs. It seemed I needed to make my way back to the station. Alright, bye. I'll see you later. We're going outside. So what's the news on Green? Frankie asked as I was headed up the stairs. Now it seemed like I had all the details. I summarized it for him. So the total wrap. Green isn't really green at all. He's Bragg the Jester, a former member of Egan's Rats from St. Louis. He's Bragg? Frankie was shocked. He's been here a while, Malone. Sure, I said, but only since 1920. He couldn't pay off his debts in Missouri, so he faked his death and moved to San Francisco. He's been longing to go back, but he needs a way to settle his score before he can show his face again. Is that where his bootlegging comes in? Frankie asked. Uh-huh. Green set up a sham rum running scheme. He bought local wine, but claimed to get it at lower prices from Canada. He convinced Tiny Paul to front him a heap of cash for it. Instead of providing the wine, he's planning to skip town with Paul's money, disappearing to St. Louis with enough dough to pay back his debts. He's already faked his death once, so he'll do it again here? Frank asked. That's right. His plan is similar to his last one. Hire a detective claiming he's scared for his life, fake his death, then know the police won't bother with underground violence. Frankie looked at me with a blank stare. Seems like all the pieces fit, he said, so he just hired you as a cover. I sighed. Seems like it. Don't worry about that, Frankie started saying, but I cut him off. I'm going to see Shipman now. I'll sweep away this mess, then come back and see you. Have a stiff drink ready, I instructed. Just be careful, Malone. Egan's Rats have a reputation. They can be ruthless. I turned and walked up the stairs. There was only one place to go. Green had hired me for cover so that he could blow town. Shipman held the final evidence to sink that plan. I needed to get to the station. We're gonna go to the station. Get in the freaking car. I stepped in the taxi cab and was consumed with my own thoughts about the case. Guess I'm not talking to the driver. I'd finally caught my break, but it was a dud. I hadn't realized it, but I'd been reveling in real detective work. Once I learned it was all bunk, my mind reverted to its incessant nagging. I wondered if I knew that I wallowed in. I knew that a woman could be a good investigator, but I questioned why I thought that was me. I was hardly helping anyone. It all came back to the same basic premise. You're failing, my inner voice said. I began to feel nauseous in the car. My mind repeated its last thought. You are failing. Great. And then everything turned to black. I don't like this. As if someone had shut all the lights. My naked arms faded into view. They emitted a soft white glow. I rubbed my eyes, willing them to focus, but without success. Between my fingers, it appeared in the distance. What is that? I could hardly see, but as the object billowed, a clarity came to me. Then I understood what it was. Lewis's gray coat. Hey! I floated towards it. I reached to grab the coat, which was when I saw the needles. No, not needles. Glass. Shards falling all around me. One piece wedged itself deep in my right elbow. I grimaced, but I was unable to make any noise or movements. But then, as suddenly as the rain had started, it stopped. I looked upwards with caution, wary of the rain's return, but above me I saw the gray coat. It was no longer billowing. It was rigid, a shield against the terrible rain. It started falling, slowly at first, but quickly it gained speed. It came upon me and enveloped me completely. It was suffocating. I I couldn't breathe. I let out a gasp. Hey! And then the light. It pierced my eye sockets, hitting the back of my skull like a hammer on an anvil. I directed all my energy into my lungs and forced out a yell. That helped. Everything became quiet, and I could breathe deeply. I noticed someone beside me. He gradually came into focus. Shipman showed his teeth in a big smile. I looked up at him from my laying position on the Murphy bed. He swung his leg over a chair and sat beside me. Thought you'd never come around, he said. What happened? I tried to ask him something, but another bolt of pain raced up my elbow. All I managed was a groan. Relax, PC, just a few scratches. Quite the auto crash. Flew straight through the front window. They took out a large piece of glass from your right arm. I nodded in agreement. I grimaced as the shake sent a sharp pain through my skull. I mumbled the words auto crash to myself. I wondered how bad the accident must have been. Shipman removed a flask from his pocket, unscrewed the top, and handed it to me. Not the best hooch, but it might get rid of that banging in your head. Okay. Hold on, I'm gonna take a swig. I took a swig. I closed my eyes and sighed a deep breath as its warmth burned down my throat. I know modern medicine doubts it, but that gulp of moonshine helped. I went to give the flask back to Shipman, but he put out a hand to stop me. Hang on to it. Might need another swig after what I'm about to tell you. Oh, great. I propped myself up on my left shoulder to listen. About Green's case, the two of us figured he was going to fake his own death. Shipman clicked his tongue to his teeth and looked towards the floor. That ain't happening. Last night, Connor Green was shot through the heart twice. Oh. Are we sure this isn't him faking it, though? What? I shouted. The exclamation was impulsive. I swung my legs quickly around and sat on the edge of the bed. My headache had suddenly vanished. Whoa there, Shipman said. Look, been here with you all night, he added quickly, in that chair beside the bed. Just telephoned the station to check in, and that's the rap they gave me. Told them what I'd known from you, and they said they'd chase it up. How do you know it was him? Another involuntary question. I was running on instinct. PC, faking your death involves a mangled body. Shot through the chest, his face is still intact. Whatever Green was planning on doing, he didn't get that far. And we looked it up. He doesn't have a twin. That would be too easy, Shipman grinned. Green hired you for this case, he continued. Gives you every right to follow it up if you want. That said, he was likely taking you for a ride. Wouldn't blame you if you want to drop it. But I'd like your help, PC. You know the case. Could use your head, even if it's been a little bumped. Once you're feeling better, I'll be at the station. Come find me there. Shipman stood up and cracked his back. Maybe I'll catch some shut-eye on top of my desk, too. Sure beats that chair you got. He turned and walked out. Well, my kitty's here! I mean, the kitty. It's not my kitty, but he comes and visits me. I stood up from the creaking bed and surveyed the cluttered apartment. Kitty. The cat slept at the foot of the bed. I scratched behind his ear. He seemed to like that. Apartment was already cramped when the Murphy bed was up. With it down, I could barely squeeze through the living room. Okay. I'm going to end this video here. I've been recording for a while because I was walking around for a while. But I don't know how long this game is. I'm very intrigued about what's going on, so this may be multiple parts. I'll find out how long it is, and we'll see. This has been a case of distrust for Steam Spelunk. Hey! Okay, I looked it up. It's not that long. We could probably finish it in either another episode or a couple episodes. If I cut out all my wandering and like stuff that doesn't go anywhere, it may be able to be 2 or 3 episodes. So you will see more of this game. But for now, I'm going to end this video. I hope you're having a great everything, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!